Welcome to the Pain to Superpower broadcast, where I believe I can help you navigate your pain in life and turn it into your superpower. I will be guiding you from the Word of God in my own personal journey through physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual pains. I know pain is subjective and can swallow you up, putting you into a self-imposed prison, if not handled in a healthy way. Pain is real, yet it can be your greatest teacher. Well, welcome to another Pain to Superpower podcast. We have a guest that goes way back with me, back to the early 90s. Let's just say that, where we met as in the fraternity Alpha Gamma Omega, where she was a little sister. My future wife, was a little sister, and they become great friends, as well as us too. So we've journeyed through life quite a bit, and we could tell each other stories. That's how close we are. We're excited to have Mindy on today and share a pain moment from her life. And before we get to that, remember you can go to morethan.that.info and download my Pain to Superpower map and how to get through your individual pain in life. It's a 4-step series. I'll send you emails weekly after that and just explain each of those layers. So yeah, Mindy, great to have you. Excited to have you here today. It's always good to see your smile, and thank you for the years of friendship that we've shared. And it's been 30 plus.
Yeah.
So not that anyone would even think we're over 30.
Oh,
at least
definitely
you.
not.
But hey, we want you to share your story in life. And I know there's many pain stories, but the Lord always teaches us great lessons. It's one of his greatest tools to grow us
Yeah.
when we least expect it,
Yeah.
when we don't want it. But
Yeah.
Mindy, go ahead and share your pain story, and then at some point transition over to what the Lord has taught you through that great difficulty.
Truly. Thank you so much, Mike, for having me on the show. And it's interesting. This story that the Lord brought to my mind over the years, it's kind of a dramatic one. And so people would ask me, and I felt like, gosh, I feel like I'm just talking about myself all the time. And God just really convicted me, Mindy, it is not your story. It's my story. So please tell it, because I'm the one that gets the glory. So that's the story. When you asked me about being on the show, that's the story that really came to my mind. So yeah, that's the story I'm going to share. So just a little bit of history of the story. This was about 20 years ago. I was 34 years old. I had 3 kids. They were 5, 3, and 1. My daughter, as a 1-year-old, ironically, she was actually about 18 months old, and she did not walk. She was a peanut, like 18 pounds. She didn't walk. She started walking around Christmas of 2002. And a week later, I had a kind of wild, catastrophic, very painful, crazy event happen. And what happened at that time was I had a brain aneurysm. And if you're not medical, a brain aneurysm, you might not even know how to spell aneurysm, to be honest. So a brain aneurysm is, for me anyway, it was in my frontal lobe in my brain. I was at home. It was New Year's Eve, actually. I had just come back from the grocery store. I had gotten some snacks to have. We were having some friends over to have played games or something for New Year's Eve. And one of my kids was taking a nap. 2 of my kids was in the backyard. And I walked out to the backyard, and they were swinging, and I was pushing one of them, and I felt this massive pain. It felt like a water balloon popped in my head. And so just pain, like literally pain, just my head was filling up with pain. I just felt this pressure kind of filling my head up. And I was like, oh my word, wow, that's a pretty intense headache. And I'm growing up, like I said, I was 34. I kind of grew up having headaches. They were something that sort of ran in our family. So it wasn't unusual to have a headache. So I walked inside and I laid down on the couch, and I was like, this is a pretty bad headache. I think I'm going to take some aspirin, which is what I usually do when I have a headache. But it was just kind of weird that it had sort of come on suddenly. So I got up, and I was maybe about 40 or 50 feet to get to the bathroom to get the Excedrin. So I'm walking over there, and I can't make it. Like I'm 30. I could have run 5 miles like minutes before this happened. And I was active, exercised. I couldn't even walk 40 or 50 feet to get to my bathroom. So I stopped and turned around and went back to the couch. And I sat on the couch. I could not get my legs up onto the couch. I literally couldn't lift my legs. I couldn't use my arms to lift my legs up onto the couch. And it was New Year's Eve, and my husband was actually playing golf, and my mother-in-law was there. So she helped me get my legs up onto the couch. She went and got me some aspirin. So I'm laying on the couch, just like, like holding my head. I'm like, worst headache you've ever had. And the providential thing in that is that I'm a physical therapist by trade. And I remember from physical therapy school, they said the worst headache you've ever had, it's a brain aneurysm. And so I'm laying on the couch, just kind of like, I had my arms across my chest because my everything, I could honestly, in hindsight, I could feel myself dying. I could feel my body shutting down. My arms, all the blood is rushing to my head because, that's your body knows that your brain is the most important part of your brain and your heart, or what, keep your life sustainable. And so my all the blood's rushing to my head, which is why I have the headache. And my arms and legs, I could feel the blood leaving them. The strength was leaving my muscles. I couldn't catch my breath. I couldn't take a deep breath. So I'm laying there, like literally holding on, because I in this, and what you would call it in medical terms is intracranial pressure. So I have all this pressure in my head. And my mother-in-law walks in. I think I had just, right before this happened, I had turned my head because I wanted to include my mother-in-law in what was happening with my kids there. I didn't want her to feel like I just was using her for a babysitter. So they thought it was a pinched nerve since I had turned my head. So I'm laying on the couch and I said to my mother-in-law, I said, I think I'm dying. I think you need to call 911. And she's like, wait, what? I was like, yeah, no, really, call 911. So she calls 911 and hangs up the phone. And then she walks over to me and just puts her hands on my head and starts praying for me and praying for my head and praying for whatever's happening in there, that God would protect me and have his hand on me. And, I'm a young mom. I have 3 little kids. And so she just prays for me, and she did call 911. The paramedics get there. And at this point now, I have long hair. I'm laying on the couch and I start vomiting. So my mother-in-law is trying to turn me. And I was like, I'm sorry, please don't touch me. You can't touch me. It's too painful. Like everything is weird about my body right now. I'm feeling myself, my body shutting down. So I said, please don't touch me. So I'm laying there on my back with my hair covered in vomit, and the paramedics come in, and I remember them getting me onto the stretcher. And I remember some neighbor kids coming in, and I was like, guys, now's not a good time. And they take me out and put me in the ambulance. And I did not pass out, but I don't remember the ambulance ride at all. And then I remember being in the ER and saying to my husband, I think it's a brain aneurysm. And he mentioned that to the ER doc, because they're talking pinched nerve since I had turned my head. And it was, again, I mean, I don't, I have 3 children, I have a fairly high pain tolerance. And so I can't even, I remember as a physical therapist going into my patient's room and saying, what's your pain level? 0 to 10, 0, no pain, 10, worst pain you've ever had. And some of them would say 20, and I was like, okay, I said 0 to 10, but I would really say that pain was just pain I'd never experienced, even in having given birth to my children. So I go to the ER, my husband mentions the brain aneurysm. They take some scans and they can see that I have a blood vessel that's ruptured in my head, and people do not survive. I had a 12% chance of survival. I should have died on the spot when it first ruptured. I should have died en route to the hospital. I should have died. Like, there were so many times I should have died, and my chances of survival were just pretty minimal. So at that point, the doctors they did the films, and they saw that I had this brain aneurysm, and they had 2 options. One was to do what's called a coil, and it's a lot less invasive. And so they run a catheter through your femoral vein artery. I think it's your femoral artery, because it was in my anterior communicating artery. So they have to run it through your arterial system up to where the rupture is. Because I mean, literally at this point, my vessel has ruptured. They would run that catheter up there, and then they inject this, I don't even know, some sort of substance into the artery that reform, because now at this point, the wall of my artery has ruptured. It's open. So that's why I have this intracranial pressure. It's trying to kind of keep me from bleeding out. Right. And so they run this catheter up there and they inject this substance, and the substance kind of reforms the wall of the artery. Well, they sent my films, and the other option was to do a craniotomy, where they literally cut your head open, and they have 24 hours to make this decision, because your brain will, at this point, my brain is starting to swell. So then they sent my films to this specialist in neurology, and he looks at the films and he said, I would not do the coil, the less invasive procedure. I would not do it. I feel like it's just too risky. Like the fact that she's still alive at this point, I feel like it's too risky. So I think we need to do a craniotomy, and we need to do it right away, because otherwise they can't get in there. So the next day, they do what's called a craniotomy. They cut into your head. There's a muscle right here. It's called the temporalis muscle. They pull that back. They cut into your skull. They take your skull off. They go into your brain and they take a clamp. It's, if you smoked back in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, it's called kind of like a roach clip. It's like this little clip that opens and closes, and so they go in there and they pull the wall of your artery back together, and they put this clip around it and kind of basically hold it so that the blood will begin to flow correctly. I was highly ill. I was very critical. I was in ICU for 3 weeks. I had drains in my head. I had staples. They had shaved my hair. I had staples up and over this very large scar that I have in my head. I was pretty consistently having intracranial pressure even post surgery. That weekend that I was in the hospital, we were supposed to be actually my husband was on the board of directors for a Christian camp, and they were praying for me because we were supposed to be there and we weren't. And that the doctor, all I can say is God has had a different plan for me, honestly, because there's no reason I should have survived. The doctor ended up changing the IV fluid into my IV, and it brought my pressures down because, like a lot of time, that's like people that have high blood pressure, they need to lay off of salt because that can increase you. Like you end up having more edema and more fluid, like your body holds on to more fluid. So that was kind of similar. I think when they changed my IV fluid, it took my saline level of my body down so that my pressures were able to come down. And God literally, I really I have this visual picture of God's hand literally in my brain, holding my head together, literally. So ICU for 3 weeks. I don't remember most of that. I then was stable enough to get transferred out of the ICU, but I'm now have been in bed for 3 weeks. So I got transferred out of the ICU onto the regular floor, and they post-surgically, I had absolutely horrible care, to be honest. Like I had a great neurosurgeon, and he and God together saved my life. But post-surgery, they sent me to the floor. They didn't know what to do because people don't survive brain aneurysms. And so the physical therapist would come and they would get me out of bed, and I would be lightheaded. Of course, I'd been in bed for 3 weeks, and they would put me back to bed because they didn't know what to do with me. They didn't want me to pass out or die or have another aneurysm or whatever. And so it took to where my husband would come and get me out of bed and be like, okay, we're walking further than we did yesterday. And I had a walker. So I'm holding onto this walker, and I looked like I was definitely on something because I was so weak. I couldn't even, my balance was off. I couldn't walk like a 34-year-old should have walked. And people would come to visit me, and they were like, we can't leave until we take you for a walk, Ellen said. So I was walking down the hallway with this walker, and they sent me home. And I had 3 little kids at home. My mother-in-law was truly a treasure because the Lord knew that she stayed for 7 weeks because I had 3 little kids, and Alan, was trying to still go to his job. So he would get up and go to his job early in the morning, come home and go to the hospital when I was in ICU. And then he would, go back to work the next day. So now I'm home. I'm weak. I get on the floor with my kids. I can't get up off the floor. I'm crawling over, I literally am crawling on my hands and knees to the guardrail for our stairs and using the stairs to kind of pull myself up into like a standing position. I had been homeschooling at the time. So my oldest son was 5 and he was in kindergarten. My mother-in-law is a teacher, so she kind of took over my schooling. Our house was also on the market. I came back to feeling like I needed to drop back into my life, but I could hardly get out of bed. I could hardly walk. We did move 2 months later. I got home at the end of January, beginning of February, and we moved it. So our house is for sale. We couldn't sell our house. We ended up selling our house right at the last minute in April, and we moved in May. We had the amount. It's interesting because I know, we're talking about pain to superpower. And I feel like God was a superpower in this moment when I didn't even have any strength to get my 34-year-old body up off the floor. People came, we had people coming and cleaning our house, taking care of our kids. They brought meals for literally 3 months from our church. There were 35 people in the waiting room praying for me when I was in surgery, which I should not have survived. We moved in May. We never even got a moving truck because we had our entire church Sunday school class come and bring all of the stuff from our house in Chula Vista, 30 minutes away to our house, to this new house that we had just gotten built in El Cajon. We moved out there. I was like, okay, we're in a new place. Like I just survived a 12% chance brain aneurysm. I can do this. I've got three little kids, 5, 3, 1. I'm homeschooling. I had just had a catastrophic brain incident. I was lonely. I'm alone at home with three little kids. I had no idea. My natural personality is positivity. That's one of my strengths. So I'm the glass half full optimist, idealist sometimes. Like I don't even see the what negative can happen. Like I'm the absolute positive. And I was like, didn't want to get out of bed. And if I did, you didn't want me out of bed. I was a wreck. My emotions would fluctuate from just literally sobbing, feeling like what am I even still here for? Why did I even survive? To anger that was like I drove away without my 2-year-old because he couldn't find his shoes. I mean, just this crazy, wild emotional turmoil. And I'm trying to open up my Bible and think, okay, I survived. I need to figure this out. I need to have a new normal. I shouldn't have survived. I need to know, I need to just create a new strength that comes out of a different normal. And I was a wreck. I was a wreck. I thought I'm a little nervous about what I'm going to do to my kids. Like my anger just would flare for no reason. I mean, I threw stuff. I threw a school book at my son when he was 6. So in all of that, I would say to my husband, I'm like, do I seem fine? Do I seem okay? Like, you think I'm okay? And he's like, I mean, yeah, he just was, glad that I was alive. And so at one point I actually said to one of my doctors, I was like, yeah, I just kind of acting weird. I'm a little concerned at the way I'm acting. I feel like my anger is really, I mean, I know that I am not a perfect person. I have sin in my life. I don't do what I know I should do, but I am concerned. And she said, you need to go see your doctor. You're struggling with depression. Little did I know. And so I did. And God, in his absolute amazing sovereignty, I had a friend that struggled with postpartum depression. And so she had given me her story and talked about her postpartum depression. And so I had some experience with that, even though it was not my typical, like this wasn't my typical go-to. I just by nature am not that kind of a person. So I went and talked to my doctor and he kind of gave me something for depression. You hear so many different opinions about depression and you should just buck up and you're a Christian. You should just claim a verse and, what's wrong with you? Why do you need to take a medicine? And I need to take medicine because I'm in a broken body in a broken world. And God has provided opportunity to take this medicine to fix what this chemical imbalance that was in my head. I took it for 6 months. My friend had told me, if you're taking an antidepressant 6 months and then maybe try like weaning yourself off or lowering your dose or whatever and see if it's done its job. So I did. So I took it for 6 months but with my doctor's okay, I slowly like kind of weaned myself off just to see and I was fine. Like it had done the trick of really flipping that. I had just had a massive infarct in my brain. So I did the trick of kind of flipping that switch back to whatever that imbalance was. And there are many people, and I have so much more empathy now in my life for people that struggle with anxiety and depression and mental health issues. And that is a very real thing that was made so real to me in a time when I was just hurting in so many ways and feeling so inadequate and feeling kind of like I said like alone and lonely and how can I like I'm not even competent to school my 3 children that I love the most in the world. I'm hurting them because of my inadequacy. And so that was hard. It was a very hard season for me to just feel so many things, so incapable of being able to do what I was called to do. Like I felt like this is my job. These are my 3 children and I can't do it. I can't take care of them. I'm hurting them. I'm yelling at them. I'm throwing books at them. I just felt so alone and so like I mean in so many ways hopeless. That empty, lonely, hopeless feeling was what really caused me to start kind of trying to tell my story and to kind of share with people like something's wrong. I don't know what's wrong. And that was really what that pain and that aloneness really helped me kind of, I think, reach out. And as I spoke earlier, just about the superpower being kind of God and people stepping in and caring for us at that time, I don't think I even saw it. I just felt so weak and incapable. So I had had the brain aneurysm, December 31st, 2002. I didn't start taking the antidepressant until halfway through the year in 2003. So now it's a year and a half later, and I am not doing well. I'm kind of a wreck. And yet, I put positivity, that's me. Like, so I go out, I put on this face. I'm like, I just got to give this impression of being okay. And I was not okay. So I would say it really took me like a solid 2 years to really get to a point where I felt like I was in a new place, in a place where I could see how God had used the pain to use other people in my life to be a superpower, and then also really to show me that the power that is in me is not me. It is, I mean, so let me just transition to the lessons learned. I would really say, as I inferred about myself more than once, positivity. So, somebody that's positive, like you see glass half full, like there's not a whole lot that you struggle with. I have a ton of energy on top of that. So you take positivity and energy and you meld those together. I found a lot in hindsight, a lot of significance in my ability to serve people. I'm a total people person. I love people. I love serving them. I love making them happy, helping. I'm a helper by nature. And so I found that I realized in hindsight that I got a lot of I got my significance from that. I got my significance from my ability to serve people. I got my significance from how people responded to me. I knew that I was saved by grace through faith, and that it wasn't me that saved myself. It wasn't my actions that saved myself, so that I can't boast in them, but I was. And in hindsight, I did not know that even at the time. And so and my poor husband, I got a lot of significance from how he would respond to me. I got significance from how others responded to me. And now I had nothing. So that weakness, that physical, spiritual, emotional weakness was something that I think God really used to show me that the superpower is not in me, it's in him. It's his work in me. It's the stuff that I do is to his glory and not to mine. It's so hard to be served. So I had people stepping in and serving me when I was incapable. And I had people taking care of my kids. I had people cleaning my house. I had people making meals for me. I'm so grateful for all of that. I mean, for so many people, like it's that whole pay it forward thing. There's so many people that stepped in. I mean, like I said, 35 people in the waiting room praying, 3 months of meals, my mother-in-law staying for 7 weeks and caring for my, 3 little children. I had a God that gave a doctor the knowledge to come in to do a very intricate brain surgery, and another doctor that looked at my scans and said I wouldn't do the coil. If they would have done the coil again, I would have died. I mean, my vessel in my head was like wet toilet paper. The doctor said when he got in there, it just disintegrated, like that vessel. Like it was literally miraculous that my head was still being held together. And it's only just by the grace of God. Taught me several lessons. One, like I said already, it's not my strength, it's his strength that works in and through me. And it's not for my glory, but for his. It also gave me the perspective of, I was 34. I should not have lived. And actually, tragically, in that same time, I had a friend whose husband was killed in a plane crash, and he didn't survive, and they had 2 little kids. I'm like, I just thought, okay, Lord, why me? Like, why did I survive? What am I still here for? I know that he ordains our days and he writes our stories, and we are not guaranteed tomorrow. I should not be sitting here talking to you right now. And so that was really that conviction of like, I need to tell this story because it is not my story. It's God's story. And God using that pain, I mean, he's taught me so many things. First of all, yeah, I really do. I mean, it's easy to kind of forget again, I do really treasure each day and I try to live for this moment. Jesus tells us, today is enough trouble of its own. Don't worry about tomorrow. And so I have a verse in Psalm 27. It's a verse that I had read before, but it's really one of my life verses. Psalm 27, 4 and 5. And it says, one thing I have asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I will dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter. In the day of trouble, he will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high up on a rock. And I thought, that's being such a people person. It's very easy to go to my husband, to my friends, to, when I'm hurting, when I feel alone and just incapable of like the next step, my tendency would be to go to a friend. And there's nothing wrong with that. And even God in the Trinity demonstrates relationship, right? But is Jesus my one thing? Is that where I go to first? And is that where I find my significance and my superpower in Christ? Or do I find it in myself? Do I find it in how people respond to me? Do I find it in what I can do to make people happy? And nothing wrong with that. That's actually something that's a superpower that he does, not for my glory, but for his. So I feel like as I've reflected on this, the lesson being it's not about me, it's about God. And it's not about, I'm created for something far bigger and better than this world. So if I would have died that day, it would have been okay. It wouldn't have changed the sovereignty of God in my life, in my husband's life, in the lives of my three little children. It wouldn't have changed that. It wouldn't have changed how he is sovereign over that story, how he is continuing to write that story, how he uses suffering. I mean, Christ is an example of suffering. And in my suffering, I could share in Christ's suffering. I could suffer, Lord willing, so that as I tell this story, here on the Pain to Superpower podcast, or as I tell the story to a neighbor or to a friend, I mean, I have a pretty obvious, well, it's not so obvious anymore, but it's a pretty obvious scar on my head. It's the story, it's about him. He's the one that's writing that story. So pretty powerful lesson in that. I still struggle with people pleasing. I still tend to bend over backwards to try to make people happy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But who am I going to first? Am I going to the Lord and going, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? You're my superpower. You're the one that kept me here on this earth for a reason. How can I use this story, this lesson to your glory and not to mine? I am constantly quoting that verse in my head. Like, what's my one thing? Is my one thing the Lord? That's my superpower. That's what he's used, this incredible pain in my life, this traumatic brain injury that should have taken my life. But he's used that to give me a different perspective on life and to show me that he truly is my superpower. And my superpower is the sovereignty of knowing that he is directing my days, as many as and whatever they look like. I was just praying that this morning. I was just praying that I was thinking of that song that says, you give and take away. Lord, my heart will choose to say, Lord, blessed be your, it's going to bring me into tears. Lord, blessed be your name. And that's my prayer, like that my heart would say that every day, even when things are hard, even when people are hurting in my life, even when there's death, even when my friends are hurting, my kids are hurting, I'm hurting, that my heart would choose to say, Lord, blessed be your name in all circumstances and in every situation. And just that I would remember that I am created for so much more than this world.
Amen, Mindy. That's beautiful. You made my eyes sweat today because I was a front row observer to that. I remember getting the call on New Year's Eve and Allison and I driving from LA or Arrowhead, wherever we were
Yeah,
at,
yeah.
down to San Diego when Alan called us. And you're truly a treasure of God, and continue to remember that. And you spoke so well of your story and the goodness of God and God's faithfulness throughout this whole circumstance. It was so difficult where there were years where Allison and I like, where's Mindy at right now at the beginning of
Yeah.
all that? And we're very concerned and prayerfully concerned for you. And seeing how God met every one of your needs just screams his faithfulness to me and
Amen.
his goodness. And God's got a good eye out for us, even though he takes us through the most difficult circumstances that are we can't even think of. You couldn't imagine having an aneurysm. I couldn't imagine things in my life the way they've gone, but they've produced his character in our life. And at the end where you were just saying that your heart is just your empathy is growing so deeply, and I think we both have that in our strength finders
Yeah.
category in the top 5. But thank you for sharing your story. It was great. I wrote down a bunch of notes when Mindy was talking about struggling when she was walking at 34. I'm like, here's a Spartan competitor. Those difficult races, the half marathons, the marathons. She does it all. She's on the fast track all the time. And this really slowed her down and buckled her and taught her some great lessons. So thank you for being on the show.
And well,
Allie and I love you deeply, and vice versa. It's felt both ways through my difficulties too. But just thank you for being on the show. And I want to bring this up in a wrap. And just remember, more than that .info, get your roadmap to finding your significance. And the way we find significance is being connected to something greater than ourself. And there's nothing greater than the Great Commission. And Mindy and Al have been committed to that for years. And we praised God for that. And yeah, just check out that more than that.info. And thank you for listening to Mindy's story today. And just know that every one of my guests, if you need to talk to any of them, I can put you in personal contact with them, and they would love to help you if it's postpartum, if it's aneurysms, if it's, all the difficult stories that we've shared on this podcast. Just let me know and we'll get you in contact. And the other thing I wanted to mention for the first time is if you know a believer that has a pain story that would resonate with people, please give me their email at paintosuperpower@gmail.com. And I would love to get in contact with those people so we can continue to have weekly messages go out that I hope to do. So thank you for listening again to Pain to Superpower. Mindy, thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
And
one other thing I would say, Mike, just as you close, is if somebody would have told me in advance that I was going to walk through that, I would have said, nope, nope, I don't, I can't do that. I can't do that. Like I'm not strong enough. So in that moment, and even watching you walk through the stuff you're walking through, in that moment, God gives us the strength. If we worry about tomorrow, it just does not help. He gives us the strength. His grace is absolutely sufficient in that moment. So that's pretty cool to see that.
yeah, we'll just end with a big amen on that one.
Thanks so much, Mike.
You're more than welcome, Mindy. Thank you.